Hey everybody, thank you so much for joining us tonight on Shires TV. Tonight is a very fun episode. We get to talk with one of my trumpet heroes, Professor Terry Everson. Um, Terry has become a pretty pivotal person for us here at the Shires company. He's one of our artists. He's one of the world's greatest trumpet players and teachers and pedagogues, but also just such a close friend to us. And he's always been involved in a lot of our trumpet development. Just a super close person to our company and our hearts too. So I'm very happy to be able to bring tonight's episode to you featuring Terry. We've been wanting to get to this one for a little while, and he's had a very busy quarantine period, still with performing and teaching, and schedules have finally aligned, the stars have aligned, and we're here for you tonight. But without further ado, Terry, if you don't mind, it'd be so great if the world could hear from you just a little bit about who you are and what it is, all of the things that you do that make up your career. That would be so wonderful if you don't mind.
I can probably cobble something together.
Yeah,
And when you say I'm a close friend of the factory, it does help that I live like
you are a
2 minutes drive
neighbor.
from the factory. So I will say that for the viewing audience is not why I'm a Shires artist. It just is really convenient. But when you got great horns that are so easy to play, then sure, I'm very proud to be a Shires artist. Uh,
Great, awesome.
but I didn't start that way. My first trumpet was an Acme trumpet. I think it came in Wile E. Coyote's, trap the Roadrunner kid, or at least make him deaf, or something. I don't know. Um, yeah, my parents are both musicians. My dad was actually a professional drummer. I grew up when I was first born. The family lived in an 8 foot wide mobile home, and my dad set up his drums and practiced in that 8 foot wide mobile home.
Wow.
Me and my sister, who's just about a little over a year younger than me, sleeping. I'll tell you, kids, if you want to get good time in your playing, it's not bad to just grow up with, hearing, the Stan Kenton band and the Tonight Show band and Dave Brubeck and all those kind of things, especially the drum parts, pretty constantly.
Yeah,
It gets inside you.
it's almost like a metronome under your pillow, I guess, a little bit.
It really it is, which that might be a good idea too. I
Sure.
haven't tried that.
Osmosis.
So my parents are both musicians. My dad discovered my perfect pitch when I was about 4 years old. And my mom gave me about a year of piano lessons early on when I was maybe 5 years old or so. And everything after that, I kind of just picked up on my own on piano. Um, and the family moved around the country a little bit. We were actually out in Las Vegas, Nevada, and I was going in the seventh grade, and it was the first time at that time that I could go into beginning band. So about a month ahead of classes, went down to the junior high to register for classes, which that was a big new event for me. Wow, I'm registering for classes, picking classes, and saw beginning band. And my dad had gotten a trumpet as a Christmas bonus one year from a music store he was teaching at,
Wow.
thinking he might want to mess around with it some and learn it. He had been a music ed major at Ohio State, and had taken brass methods, knew something about it. And I'm not sure he ever really got around to it, but I knew it was in the closet. And so I said, hey, maybe I could, you know, get that trumpet out and play that. He said, fine. And so he brought it out of the closet a month before school started. And he said, okay, you do this into it to make a sound, and here are your open notes. And the second valve goes down a half step, and the first valve goes down a whole step, and the third valve goes down a step and a half.
There you
And that
go.
was my first. And a month ahead of everybody, and that head start kind of set me up all the way, at least through high school, the rest of the way. Um, you know, it's there's you don't know in the moment that you've just gotten a really valuable gift.
Hmm.
Um, but having that head start, so when I walked into beginning band, my job was not to learn the scale. My job was to teach all the other kids on the trumpet the scale. Band director says, "Oh, you know the C major scale already. You teach it." You know, and so I did that. They moved me into the intermediate band the next semester, and then the next year, and I was in eighth grade out there at that time. Eighth grade was the top of the junior high, and I was first chair in the varsity band my second year playing. Um, uh, Largely self-taught as far as music goes. I have perfect pitch. If I see it, I can hear it, and I play it. And After that year, we moved back to Columbus, Ohio, and ninth grade was the top of junior high there. So I had nobody ahead of me grade-wise, and I was first chair. Then they built a new high school that was in my neighborhood I was assigned to, and they started with just a 10th grade. And so there was nobody older than me, and I was first chair. And then the next year they added 11th grade. Yeah, you see where this is going, right?
It's
I mean,
great.
from
It's
eighth
like,
grade on, nobody to kind of beat me down in one way. Unfortunately, also nobody to challenge me the way maybe I could have been had I gone through a normal school. But I got to play first chair the whole way through.
wow.
Uh, that was good for developing um, the the will and the attitude a principal trumpet player needs just by doing it. Not so good for a young player who wasn't paying attention to mechanics, who was just trying to make things happen any way they could. I had a teacher in high school, Wes Orr. He was a great lead player in Columbus at the time, and he was taking me through Arbans and trying to get me set up right. But I just kind of was playing. What I was doing was working. It would work for me for long enough to do what I needed to do. And if I pushed hard enough, and if I stretched these corners back far enough, I could get all the high notes I needed for 3 or 4 minutes. I got through high school that way. Was My dream at that time, actually, I wanted to go out to Oklahoma and go to Oral Roberts University. And in the back of my mind, what I wanted to do was play on the TV show. Because back then they had a TV show that had like a big band or studio orchestra that was playing out there. And I'm thinking, and of course, all this time, what I didn't really mention, of course, my dad, I'm still listening to the albums my dad was listening to. And of course, the huge personality that was on so many of these albums, who's coming,
Yep.
the Doctor. I was listening to Doc, and I thought that kind of playing is just what I want to do. I would try to play along with his albums.
Yeah.
Never had any music for him, just played, listened and played. And so that's what I wanted to do when I got out of high school. So I was going to stay out a year, practice, work, make money, and then go out to school. Well, about 3 or 4 months into that plan, I was spending all my money. I was coming home tired from the job I was working and not practicing well. And my dad got me set up with a guy he was playing with on club dates. Gentleman by the name of Richard Burkhart. And it just so happened that Richard Burkhart was the main trumpet professor at Ohio State at the time. And my dad got me a couple of lessons that fall with him. And Dr. Burkhart's, in the first lesson, he said, so, there's a lot of ways we can train a trumpet player. What are you interested in? What do you want to do? Let's decide what you want to do. And in my mind, I'm thinking that studio orchestra. I'm thinking Tonight Show. I'm thinking, the ORU show or whatever like that. And so in my mind, I'm thinking the studio orchestra. And I say, well, I guess an orchestra player has to be able to do about everything, so, let's do that. I left a word out.
Yeah, totally.
It was kind of an important word because the difference between a studio orchestra and an orchestra is huge. And I'm thinking Tonight Show, and he's thinking Mahler 5. And of course, he's the teacher, so he starts guiding me toward orchestra. Fortunately, I really liked it,
Yeah.
and I didn't know anything about it. I didn't know who Mahler was. I mean, so he let me into Ohio State that January. I started like 10th chair in the concert band, which was the second band at the time.
Wow.
And I was chair there because I played my audition for the wind ensemble director, who was also doing the concert band, and he heard me play, and he's like, "Okay," he said, "Do you have the symphony band time open in your schedule?" And as it happened, I had another class. I think it was like French literature or something like that, and I told the truth. I said, "No, I don't have that time." And he was kind of sitting there stewing, and there was a knock at the door, and another member of the trumpet studio, a classmate of mine who I didn't know yet, came in and said, he was a jazz major. He says, I've got a class for my jazz studies degree that conflicts with concert band this semester or this quarter. I don't know what to do. I think I have to drop concert band this quarter. And
Wow.
Markov said, "Oh, okay." And he walked back out. He turns to me and says, "Well, you're in."
There you go. That's funny.
That was my glorious first audition at Ohio State. And I was 10th chair in the concert band, last chair, for that first quarter. And then over time, moved up as I got in shape and all that kind of thing. And
Yeah.
I worked with Dr. Burkhardt through a bachelor's degree and a master's degree in trumpet performance. And then took 3 auditions at the end of my master's, 2 for orchestras and 1 for a brass quintet. And I advanced in Oklahoma City, but did not make finals. I did not advance in San Diego, but the Chestnut Brass Company said, yeah, we'll take him. And so off I went to the Chestnut Brass. And so now I was a professional brass quintet player, which I was for the next 4 years. And I have to say, I enjoyed the time in that group so much. The whole time I was in it, I thought it was the greatest thing. And when I felt called that it was time to go do something else, I didn't miss it a bit. I'm weird that way. I can just kind of, switch on and off. I'm actually just very focused. Whatever I'm doing is the thing. And that's actually key to a lot of, I think, my success. During that time in the Chestnut Brass, I finally got my chops fixed. Dr. Burkhardt had tried for 5 years to get me to stop stretching and stop jamming the horn into my face. I was having too much success. I won the ITG solo competition, stretch and push. I won the ITG mock orchestra audition a couple days before that with stretch and push. My school concerto competition, I won a brass quintet job. But as I got into the brass quintet job, now I have to play 2-hour concerts. It was not going so well. And I finally got a lesson with Frank Katarabic, who's principal trumpet in the Philadelphia Orchestra, a wonderful gentleman, absolutely phenomenal, just warm human being. And I played 8 measures for him, and he says, well, you're not ready to make music yet. And so,
Whoa, geez.
yeah, it was a great day. I wasn't so sure at the time, but it was, and I was finally ready to listen because things weren't working. It's unfortunate, some people are knuckleheads like me, that you wait until something's not working before you're finally ready to listen and fix it. So he gave me exercises to fix that. It took a while, but got my chops straightened around, and I left the Chestnut Brass Company in June of '88, just before the deadline for entering the Ellsworth Smith competition, the very first time the ITG had ever organized the Ellsworth Smith. And they organized it in 2 divisions, a Baroque classical division and a 20th century division. And I entered both, and I made it into both, and I won both.
It's still so crazy to me, just even though I know the outcome to that, but
it's, well, and that's the thing too. I mean, pardon me if I kind of like mix a little advice in with my life story here.
good, great.
Until I won the Ellsworth Smith, I'd never won the Ellsworth Smith. I mean, that sounds kind of dopey, but you think about it, who I was, and a lot of it had to do with my self-image. One of the things that does not make it on my resume is the fact that I played in a regional competition in Connecticut 1 week before that, and went down in flames. It was
wow. Okay.
the worst competition I've ever played in my life. No other competition, no other audition went that badly in my entire life. 1 week before the Ellsworth Smith.
Wow.
And that's when I thank God for my mom. Well, I mean, I thank God for her all the time, of course. But she met me halfway between the 2 competitions. We had lunch, and she said, so, can you do what you're supposed to do for this competition? And her basic message to me, I was messed up the week before because I was waiting for some kind of miracle. I didn't know. I didn't think I was worthy to win a competition. And she says, well, you don't need a miracle if you're prepared. You just need to do what you do. I mean, essentially the miracle's in the preparation. Once she had established with me that I could do what I was setting out to do, I walked out on that stage, and I still remember the feeling walking out to play the first movement of the Telemann in the beginning of the first round of the Baroque Classical of the Ellsworth Smith, and without taking out any music on stage with me. which was another somewhat recent development before that. And I remember surviving that first piece. I remember surviving that first movement, which, that's the reason it's on international competitions, is you get through that first movement. Now you've got something going.
Right, right.
And I was just kind of shocked. I mean, I was shocked that I won. My head was on straight better than it had been the week before, but still playing well and winning are not necessarily related. Anybody can show up and play really well, and you have no control over that. But I put my message across, and I thought at that time, well, maybe now my ship has come in and everything's going to roll easily for me, and it's just going to be, one success after another. And I was so mistaken. I kept on freelancing in Philadelphia. I was there for another 5.5 years after that. And in the meantime, I'd won another international competition out in Oklahoma. I don't do so well in international competitions outside of the United States, I suppose. But, international, but it's in the border. I can do
You're
that.
right. Yeah.
And got married and was freelancing in Philadelphia. And I'd started teaching some at the Philadelphia College of Bible. The trumpet instructor there went on a 2-year mission trip to Kenya. And I played a recital up there after I won the Ellsworth Smith, and the director of the music school, who actually was also a trumpet player himself, but mainly a pianist singer, but a good trumpet player, he pulled me aside afterwards and said, our guy's going to go to Kenya for a couple years. Would you be maybe interested in doing some teaching for us? Okay. I mean, when I was in school, I was never going to teach. It was just, I took brass pedagogy. When I went off to auditions, I didn't go get the notes that I'd missed. My teacher made note of this in my notebook in a very pointed way. But I didn't care because I wasn't going to teach. What do I need all this brass pedagogy stuff for? What do I need this brass literature stuff for? I'm a player. I'm just going to go play. And so I started teaching on a very, very part-time basis. I think I had 2 students the first year, maybe 4 the second year there. And then, the trumpet teacher came back and the theory teacher left. So then I started teaching music theory for another 2 years because, when you're freelancing and you've got, a mind of something else you can do, then yeah, go ahead and do that. And their theory courses met at 8 and 9 in the morning, so it didn't get in the way of my gigging so much. Every once in a while, I'd have to go to if I'd be subbing in the Philly Orchestra, I'd have to leave early to go down to a rehearsal or something like that. But I did that for a couple years, and then I got a call from the University of Kentucky. I had played at an ITG conference in 1993. I premiered a piece by Stanley Friedman called La Pittura for trumpet and brass quintet, and somebody heard me there. Ron Holtz, who teaches at Asbury College, taught there at the time, and when Vince DiMartino left UK, Ron called up the committee, said, hey, I heard this guy at ITG last year, probably at Liberty, he's a freelancer in Philadelphia, maybe you should call him to see if he's interested in the job. And I have to say, they called me the first year for a 1-year position to see if I was interested, and I thought, I'm a freelancer, and leaving a big city to go away for a year and then thinking you're going to walk back into
It's a big risk. Yeah, of course.
I mean, because whoever fills those jobs is going to do it well, and they're not a placeholder, they're a person. They do the job well. I can't expect to just walk back into town. So I said, a 1-year position, no, I thank you very much, but no.
Yeah.
Well, the next year they called again, and now it was about, am I interested in the full-time job? And I said, well, maybe I am. And so I applied, and lo and behold, I became a full-time college trumpet professor who was never going to teach.
And don't choose a Vince DiMartino.
Well, yeah, I mean, just that minor figure in the trumpet world, to go. I mean, put a pin in that concept too, by the way, because it might come back a little later. But so, I took over at UK. I didn't know what the heck I was doing. I feel like I want to refund the tuition money of my 2 or 3 years of students there. Over time, I grew into it some, but paperwork, committees, stuff, and I just, and I, for better or worse, hosted the ITG conference my last year there. Vince said, "That's great. I'll help you out. It'll be great. We'll help you." And and then you go to do it, and it's like, Vince. I mean, he did everything for me that I ever asked him to. So
Of course
I
he
gave
did.
him a little hard time, but I mean, Vince is type A, high energy, and he'd hosted the conference there 17 years before that. And of course, Vince is just a get it done guy. I'm the introvert. I'm the in the shell. And my wife found me a few times that spring in fetal position on our bed.
Yeah.
Honey, you said you wanted to do this. I said, no, make it go away. But I mean, the pressure of all of it. I became a new dad in in '97, just before that, and I thought I'm not sure that the teaching I'm fine with, but all this other stuff that universities want you to do, I don't think I'm down with it. So I turned in a resignation. My church put me on halftime as minister of music, and I thought I'll see what soloing I could get. So 1998 to '99, I'm out just kind of playing wherever people want me. In April of that year, I get a phone call, and it's from my trombone colleague. He says, Scott Hartman just called me. They've got a failed search at BU, Boston University. If he'd said BU, I wouldn't know it was. I mean, Boston University. I barely heard of Boston University. And they're looking for somebody. Do you think you might be interested in getting back in? I'm like, well, to be honest, things weren't really just like pouring in the door.
Right.
So I said, okay. And so I called up Scott, and then Scott hooked me up into Gary Offenloch, who was the chair of the department here at the time. And they said, well, we've got two other guys waiting that we're bringing in. If we like one of them, we're going to hire them, just so you know. I said, okay, let me know.
Yeah.
And they, a couple weeks go by, and he says, okay, your turn. And so May 9th of 1999, I mean, how late in a year can you have an audition for a full-time job at a university?
Wow.
I auditioned. It was a good day for Boston. Nomar Garcia Parra hit 3 home runs that night. And I evidently hit a home run too, and they hired me. So, it wasn't enough that in my career I'm following Vince DiMartino. Now I'm following Roger Voisin.
Yeah.
So, and I came to Boston and thought my ship had come in again. Thought everything's just going to roll, everything's going to sail now, and then settle in for a while. And it was a long haul when I first came to Boston. This is an orchestra town. I'm a soloist. And the students, some of them, were looking at me like, oh, you're a soloist. Okay, and it was a little tough for a while. But with time, I think I finally won them over. Like to think I did. I've had now, let's see, I think my incoming class will bring my total of students at BU to about 124 over the last 20, well, it'll be 22 years after this next year.
And all very satisfied and happy.
I'm
Well,
I'm hoping. I'm doing my best, and but it was 8 years in town before I really started subbing with the BSO and the Pops. It took a pretty good audition, and they didn't have openings every day.
of course,
Um,
yeah.
so I played a pretty good audition, made the finals once, and they started putting me on the list. And then eventually, in about 2014, I'd been doing some playing in the Pops, playing like third and fourth, every once in a while, maybe a little bit of principal. And they asked me if I'd be willing to play principal on a tour of the Southwest on the second half of every show. I said, okay, I'm willing as long as you guys have checked this out with Bruce Hall, because
Yeah.
Bruce, and a lot of people don't even know who Bruce is, which is a real shame, because Bruce's playing probably has been heard by more people worldwide over the years than practically any other orchestra player, being principal trumpet in the Boston Pops Esplanade Orchestra, every July 4th and whatnot. Bruce, as it turned out, was very happy to have me in. And shortly after that, they kind of, switched us up and, had me play principal, and he's still playing third, and another of the finest, uh, colleagues that anybody could ever ask for. These kind of situations could be really awkward.
Sure, yeah.
Seen it in the music business. Even Roger himself. The legend has it that he showed up for work one day as principal trumpet of the Boston Symphony to find Armando Guttalla in the chair, and the management supposedly hadn't told Roger, and this, and it was a hard pill for him to swallow. By the time I knew Roger, he had dealt with it all and actually talked about the attitudes you needed to have as a first player, and then an attitude you'd need to have as a third player, even though you'd been first before that.
Yeah,
And
that's
he
interesting.
really, I mean, he helped me. I never took a formal lesson with Roger, but every master class he ever gave at BU, I was just sitting there just shoveling it all in. Things about work attitudes and ethics and musicality and articulation and fundamentals and things. And for among the world of non-Roger students, I'd like to think maybe I'm the biggest Roger student among his non-students. Like I said, eventually transitioned into playing principal trumpet with the Boston Pops Esplanade Orchestra. So when we have July 4th concerts,
Right.
I play those. When we go on tour, I play those. And I've tried to keep my soloing up and tried to keep the studio going and keep all that going at the same time. Here in town, I've played on the Boston Modern Orchestra project for somewhere north of 50 CDs, maybe 60 by now.
Yeah, a
Uh,
lot.
and we won our first Grammy this last year. I've got a Grammy certificate out in the living room now that I'm fixing
Amazing.
to put up in my office for our recording of Tobias Picker's opera Fantastic Mr. Fox. We do suspect that maybe the voters who don't know opera so well saw the title Fantastic Mr. Fox and for some reason thought that was better than something like La Traviata or what is this Ada that but
Yeah,
Fantastic Mr. Fox, that one with George Clooney, I like that one.
very good one.
You when you get a Grammy, you take it any way you can get it.
Yeah,
But I will say it's an outstanding recording of an outstanding opera. So
that's
uh,
very cool.
I'm rambling now.
No, 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 no. This is all. I mean, these are all.
My students are like, "And what's new?" But
No. So, in addition to all of that, I mean, there are a few other things that you have on your plate. You're involved with the National Trumpet Competition, right? When did that start? How did that come about?
ooh, well, I have a young man named Kevin Maloney to thank for that. Kevin,
A great guy.
when he came up for his master's at BU from East Carolina, brought up the idea of, you know, going down the National Trumpet Competition. I'd sent a few students here and there to it, didn't know much about it. I'd never met Denny, and sometimes they'd come back with comment sheets that I couldn't read and couldn't see who was judging, and I was kind of like, I don't know what this is, but Kevin said, no, it's really good. It's really good. We have to go down, do some solos. We can put some ensembles together. I said, okay, let's give this a shot. So we started, putting together ensembles and things, and we actually started doing pretty well. A couple of the pieces I wrote for the group took second prize, which was pretty nice. And my students did pretty well in the contest, and I started judging some and seeing what the whole vibe was and what the vision of NTC was. And I was just really, I mean, from the very first time I actually saw it myself, I said, oh, this is great. And it's so obviously about the students.
Yeah, 100%.
I mean, Denny. I mean, Denny Edelbrock, the founder, is just all about educating students, about advancing, kids in the field and whatnot. And so, I know, maybe 3 or 4 years after I started bringing people and doing a lot of judging, they asked if I'd be willing to serve on the board. So I came on with that. And when I came on, Carl Sievers was the rules coordinator. And I thought that was just a grand situation. I thought that was terrific. And then Carl left, and then they needed another rules coordinator, and now that's me. And so I think I've been doing that for, oh my goodness, 6 or 7 or 8 years by now. It seems like forever. I have to say, I mean, I joke about it some. I love serving, and I kind of do have a passion for trying to get rules right, for trying to make them as succinct as they can be. I mean, if I could put out the rules for the NTC that would just fit on one note card, I'd be just take me home, Jesus, I'm done. But it's more complicated than that, obviously. So every year I propose rules changes. Other people do too. We vote on them, and I'm the one that kind of crafts things together. And then I'm the one that takes all the inquiries about, well, this is happening or that's happening, and then I have to make judgment calls. And to be honest, most of the most of the questions I get from NTC aren't so much judgment calls. It's just like this is what the rules say,
Yeah.
and I'll tell you it's painful every time I have to tell somebody I understand your situation, but either you're making a choice to do something that's not going to be in accordance with the rules, or just life is happening. And I tell students sometimes, like I have this big, I mean, sometimes district bands or all state bands or orchestras will happen over top. I mean, you can't avoid everything. You
Of course
just
not.
can't. And a student will be like, well, my all state band rehearses until this time, and I can't be there until this, or I have to leave before that, and can I still? And I tell them, I try to be very philosophical about it. I don't know how well they always take it. Generally, the feedback I get is very good, actually. But I said, the better you get at music and the longer you go in it, the more opportunities you're going to have. And the more opportunities you are going to have, the more time some of those opportunities
Sure.
are going to happen at the same. I mean, if
Yeah.
if I had a nickel for all the gigs I've turned down, well, I still wouldn't be very rich. But if I had $1,000 for every gig I turned down, I'd be doing pretty well. And I've often turned down gigs that pay more than the gig I'm already committed to, but I'm committed, and my name is to me more important than how much money got in my bank account that particular week.
Sure.
It's easier to make. I mean, I confess it's easier to make principled decisions when you got a full-time job. I understand that, but I will say I was doing that when I was a freelancer too, and I will get more calls as a freelancer because they knew I would show up and not bail, because something else better came along. I digress. We were talking about NTC. This
Well,
is what
yeah, I
happens
mean,
with me.
but no, it's perfect. I mean, it is such a super organization, and like I've been involved with it for 15 years now, like myself, just from going and helping out because I thought it was such a cool thing. Me and my dad would go. Um, but yeah, it is a very incredible organization, and so many of your students have gone. Like, what do you think the value is for a student participating in competition like that? And especially now, like there will continue to be more and more things, even during this time, with online versions of competitions. So
Mhm.
is that something that you suggest your students to pursue? This world of
It
competition.
Yeah, it varies. I mean, I am not just a competition nut. I've been selective about things I've entered myself,
Sure.
and I tell my students that they can be selective about what they enter. I get all sorts of announcements through my email about this competition, that competition, and I look at, okay, what's the prize? I mean, and I don't say that just because we should be money grubbing, greedy persons, and if there's not a big enough, money prize, but to me, a money prize offered by a competition means that whoever's organizing it is really going to some effort, raising funds in some way, and doing something back, for the people that are entering it. So I mean, I can start a competition tomorrow. I can start a Terry Everson competition, and everybody send in a recording, and the one who wins will be named the winner of the Terry Everson competition. And I'm like, well, yeah, what, what will that mean?
Sure.
Really. So I do look for, if in a competition, I'm looking to see, how committed are the people running this to actually make this something really special, which is why I've stuck with NTC all these years.
Sure.
Um, and I mean, Denny has done so much work in raising sponsorship and raising prize money and whatnot. And I see that commitment, and so you go down to NTC, and a lot of students, they, even in a place like BU, which is a pretty good school. I mean, you could be a big fish at BU, but maybe not a big fish nationally. And
Yeah.
how are you going to know? You know, and so going down to a competition like this, and one of the reasons I love the trumpet ensemble competition is it gives a lot of kids who might not be ready to do the solo competition just yet. Um, so I mean, if it was only a solo competition, they don't get the solo competition, then they stay home.
Right.
You know, you get into the ensemble competition. Oh, now you're there. Now you hear groups from other places. You hear students from other places at your level. Sometimes you hear students at lower levels that you say, oh, okay, I need, I mean, I was there when Natalie Dungy won those 2 years in a row,
I
the
know.
Artunian and the Tomato. He was what, 10 and 11 or 11 and 12 or something like
Like,
that. And now I've played with Natalie professionally. It's like it's such a small world. But for students to be able to hear what other students are doing and know that there's a standard. When I was in school, I would listen to Maurice Andre or Doc or Phil Smith or whoever, and as far as I was concerned, I mean, the standard was so high, and I'm thinking, I just didn't see a bridge for me from where I was to where they were.
interesting. Yeah.
I mean, Frank Katarevich came to Ohio State, gave a master class. He walked on stage, and as I tell my students often, he might as well have been an alien from planet Zeta, that was already, I mean, a very talented and stocky alien from planet Zeta who could play the trumpet like nobody's business. So I think it never lost an audition in his life or anything like that, and then walk back off stage, and I'm like, I still don't see the bridge. I was blessed to have lessons with him later on in life,
Right.
and say, oh, okay, but at NTC, now you see a whole lot of people that are a lot closer to your age, coming through and saying, okay, that person's really excellent. They're not Phil Smith yet, but I can actually see a bridge from me to them, and I can see a bridge from them to Phil Smith or something,
Yeah.
and it opens up the possibilities for people in that way, and certainly the discipline of preparing for competition is never misplaced. I never. I mean, I will sometimes try to get my ensembles kind of hyped up and all this kind of stuff. Let's go win. Let's go. We're gonna take it to Whiff and those Baylor kids this year. Yeah. Whiff is a very good friend, and what a program! Oh my goodness! But
Yeah.
but I mean, I'll sometimes jokingly hype this stuff, but it's like, but my general attitude going to these things is, you go you win if you've done well for yourself, and if a prize happens to come along with that, that's awesome. That's great. But that's certainly the attitude I have gone into, with my own competitions. Once I got out of school, I had the wrong attitude when I was in school. It's too much about winning, to be honest.
Sure.
And I've tried to help my students overcome that. Be excellent, tell your story, and if it's what the judges want to hear that day, your story is going to win. I've told my story in other competitions and auditions where I thought I told my story the way I wanted to, and the panel said no, no, thank you, and I walked out of there thinking that's okay. I mean, the last BSO audition for third trumpet that I took when Tom Siders won, I played my semifinal round. I walked out of there saying, well, there was 1 out of 2 note that in an outdoor overture that I didn't like. Other than that, I did everything the way I wanted to do it,
Hmm.
and they didn't want to advance me. And I talked to 2 people on the panel later, found out why they didn't advance me. Too loud in a few excerpts. One of them voted for me, and the other one didn't. And I said, well, but I told my story, and I did what I want. And do I have any regrets about that? No, no, no.
Yeah. Interesting.
I am I am firm exactly where I'm supposed to be, and I'm doing exactly what I'm supposed to do. And that's always just what I'm trying to do is just what am I supposed to be doing right now, and fulfilling. I've got no regrets. So I try to. Yes, it's not always easy. I mean, again, it's always easy to be glib about these things when you've got things on your resume. When before you've got them on your resume, it's a whole different feeling, and I try to stay connected with my students to not forget how that feels.
Of course. Yeah.
I don't have a job on my resume yet. Now you're telling me to feel this way about this. So, well, yeah, because if you stick with it, time will prove, that you've done what you're supposed to be doing.
That's it's a very nice rounded way to say stay open for possibilities and opportunities. Yeah.
I mean, because what when I got out of school, I was thinking, well, I'll be an orchestra player, or maybe I'll be a soloist. That was still kind of off in the distance. I still wasn't sure I could do that. That was my deep down thing. What I really deep down probably wanted to still do was what Doc does, and be a soloist and be an orchestra player. What job out there would allow somebody to play with Doc's style and be able to play orchestral stuff and really also be able to kind of like do some lead trumpet and stuff? I mean, let me think.
How funny how this works out.
How about that?
Hmm.
And with the Boston Pops Esplanade Orchestra, that's not a job that has open auditions. It's, for those, a lot of people might not be familiar with this. There are two Boston Pops orchestras. There's the Boston Pops that you see on Evening with the Pops. That's almost all Boston Symphony players. And then the Esplanade Orchestra, which is what plays on July 4th and on tour, there are no BSO players in there. It's all freelance. That means there's no tenure.
Right.
There was no extensive audition process in the traditional way. I think there's a better audition process for the Pops Esplanade, which is you get invited and you go in and you play in the orchestra and they see how it works.
Right.
And if you keep doing well, that's great. But there's also no tenure. So I try not to miss too many notes. I've occasionally I'll lay a patch out there, and sometimes Keith and I will laugh about it at intermission, and I'll walk away from the laugh thinking he's laughing now, but if I do it tomorrow night, I bet he won't laugh. So you in one sense you're always auditioning.
Yeah.
But that job for me. I mean, I love Mahler and Strauss and orchestral repertoire. It's awesome. But the chance to be playing concerts where you get to do everything. I mean, we're going out. Our tour program these last few years, and I think for the next couple of years, is all John Williams.
Wow.
I mean, come on.
Something, but what a blast. I mean,
And I get to stand up and play JFK.
yeah.
And does it get better than that? Tell me how. I'm not exactly sure. So through playing quintets and solos and part-time college teaching and full-time college teaching and some music theory teaching, and writing pieces for my kids and arranging things for other people, and I mean, people look at my resume and they could either think, well, he can't hold a job because there's so many things on
Right. Right.
or people they're just blown away. How do you have all this on there? And I said, well, I just eat each one of them one at a time. And for those who don't know me, I'm very, very focused. I am the world's. I think I might have a medal for the world's worst multitasker. When my list gets big, that's when it's that fetal position I talked about earlier.
Yeah,
It's,
totally.
make it all go away. I've actually got a list on the table right now of I think about 13 things I'm supposed to be doing, not this minute, but projects and things.
Yeah.
But when I get on one thing, so for instance, when I did the Ellsworth Smith, I mean, I'd left the quintet. I had a little bit of freelance work going in Philadelphia at the time, but not much. I was in my apartment and just practicing, and my focus was just right there. To the expense a little bit of paying my rent and my utility bills. I was fortunately renting from a member of my church who was willing to let things go for a few months. I mean, that $7,000 I won that weekend was gone.
Yeah. Yeah.
Pretty much like that. By the time I paid my accompanist, the plane fares, my back rent, my back utilities, and whatnot. But I can, when I'm on a project, I can just focus like crazy. And other people with other projects I'm supposed to be doing will be like, "Where are you? Where are you? Where are you?" I'm like, "Oh, sorry, I'm working on this one right now."
And you were early for this thing tonight, so.
What's that?
I said you were early for this tonight, so I.
I was. Well, I try to be prepared because this is my focus right now.
Yeah. So speaking of that, and also like taking it one day at a time, with everything that's going on right now and preparing to get back into the teaching side of things for the fall semester and your students, things are going to be different. How are you thinking about suggesting to your students they structure their own practicing and routines when there might not be large ensembles or there might not be these in-person opportunities to do competitions or whatever?
Yeah, it's going to be different. And the thing is that how do we compare exceptional times? Every generation does this at some point or another. This situation, nobody has faced anything like this ever,
Right.
in our memory. And yeah, certainly, there are in our performing careers right now, I would say, yeah, this is the biggest disruption imaginable. But the other thing I tell my students is that nobody gets renowned by doing things that are expected. You get known when you're Bernstein, waiting backstage and they say, "Oh, Walter's sick. You're going on and conducting Mahler 3 tonight." and then you do it, you know. When you do what's not expected, what's exceptional. I mean, I didn't think that what I did at the Ellsworth Smith at the time was that exceptional, playing everything by memory. But I was over prepared, and I just went and did it. Um, and that's what it's going to take right now. Is going to be people saying, I don't care what's going on right now. Rodney Marsalis and I have talked about this some. It's like, we both are wondering, when the fog finally lifts, who are going to be the monsters all of a sudden that come out that nobody knew about, but because there's this hiatus and they just decided, I'm going to stick at this and I'm going to perfect this and this and this. I mean, on the one hand, one of the things I've never really liked about universities is the fact that, because we have to have benchmarks and assessment and grading and all this kind of stuff, it means, okay, well, we have to have a jury at this time, and we have to have a recital at this time, and a recital permission at this time, and all these boxes.
Yeah.
Now, it's really easy. I rebel against it as much as I can, but I'll admit I do fall into the trap some, of starting to teach to the test.
Mm-hmm.
It's so you get 3 weeks before the jury, and all of a sudden we're not doing etudes anymore. It's just the jury piece and all this. And I mean, my students will oftentimes, yeah, can we do that more? I'm like, yeah, okay, yeah, and we do. If we don't have so many performances, that I need to be ready for. I mean, if a student has to go through an embouchure change right now,
right,
great, because there may not be a wind ensemble concert we need to worry about in 3 weeks, or an orchestra concert or something like that. So it's a great time to really go through the self-assessment, and say, what are my strengths, what are my weaknesses, what am I doing about the weaknesses. My basic approach. Is my basic approach sound? Is it according to principles or somebody's method? I'll tell you, I'm reading an advanced copy of a book by a good friend right now, that is making exactly that point. And this is how I've always operated in my playing. At least to the best of my knowledge. My knowledge has often been faulty or incomplete. This, but it's as I've been able to turn things around to make sure I'm playing with good principles. The methods I happen to use, whether they're ones I've come up with myself or stolen from somebody like Chickowitz or John Daniel or Whiff Rudd or Jimmy Stamp or Carmine Caruso or whatever. I mean, those are all methods of going about things.
Mm-hmm.
The ones that work well for people work well in conjunction with good principles.
Yeah.
So air makes things happen. It's not a matter of squeezing my lips together really tight and getting all tight and trying to buzz in that way. There are better ways to make this happen. And so, so people should be examining, the principles of playing, the principles of how, a sound comes out of a trumpet, and start aligning their methods with that while they've got the time. And at BU, I'll be teaching in my studio. I've got a big office now, thankfully.
Much nicer.
It's a much bigger office than it was. I can actually teach in it and keep distanced. They're going to provide us with some plexiglass shields as well,
Okay.
for extra protection. And they've got protocols in place. They had a committee. My good friend Sheila Kibbe, bless her heart, came back from a leave of absence to run a committee on how to do everything as safely as we can. And they came up with recommendations, and so we're following all that. As many lessons as I can give live, I'll give live. When it needs to be on Zoom, I'll be doing it on Zoom. Mm-hmm. I've got ideas for chamber ensembles that may be kind of a hybrid of doing things live and doing things and starting to learn audio and video production.
Nice.
That's the other thing I kind of dug into since everything shut down, was audio and video production. I call my philosophy good enough for good enough for YouTube or Facebook, which is that I don't consider the audio that I'm putting together to be high enough quality to put it on a CD, or the video to put it on TV, movie screen. But on Facebook and on somebody's phone through their little buds, it's going to be fine. And that was the impetus behind putting together the Arrival of Queen of Sheba that I did with my trumpet studio back in April. Then a project with my family in May, and another project of my own in June. And I didn't do anything in July new. I'm thinking of a couple things, but I'm thinking, students today, it's going to be very valuable to learn some of these other skills. And whether that is audio and video production, I think obviously those are going to be really valuable for musicians to present themselves.
Sure.
Uh, you don't necessarily have to have good video production if you can get good audio production and have something really inventive in that way. But if you can combine the video with it too, I know people are probably pretty burnt out on all the, now the Brady Bunch, videos and all this kind of stuff. But it's not going to stop us from doing them. Because
No, we might not have any choice. Yeah.
that's the way we have an audience right now. So my mind right now is to obviously keep on helping my students and the brass students at BU develop their trumpet skills, their musical skills, their ensemble skills, but start also upping the ante a little bit. It's really not enough just to be able to play the Canon Sonata really well. Um, you know. What else can you do? What else do you have? I mean, I was a theory teacher for a couple of years. Didn't have anything to do with my trumpet playing. It just that was what associated me with the university there. But the theory thing was a whole different thing. They just kind of found out I could do it. So do it. Figure out what you got and do it.
Right. Absolutely. No, I mean, it is wild. And we were just talking before this even started about how, like, even jumping into a somewhat new project, like Phil Snedeker's excerpt etude thing.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, you're pushing yourself, and here you are, Terry Everson. You're like, man, this stuff is hard. This stuff it's difficult, and it pushes you as a musician, and kind of makes you reflect back on what you need to spend a little bit more time investing in yourself with.
Absolutely, yeah. For those who, Sam and I were talking beforehand. I had actually taught at a live festival a couple weeks ago, and I had accommodations down there that had amazing acoustics, and so I had Phil Snedeker's lyrical etudes book, and I blew through one of those. Oh, that's great! I think I'll record that, and I put it, and with Phil's permission, I put it up on Facebook, and
Glorious.
and then Phil and I were talking, and he's like, I got these other orchestral etudes, I'm like, oh yeah, let me, I want to do those, I want to do those. And so, and if Phil's watching right now, he's probably like, yeah, I hadn't heard from Terry since then. Because I found out that blowing through that 50-second lyrical study, even though it did end on a high D, was a lot different than his Heldenleben etude. And I'm still working on doing a good job, because I'd love to put some of those out there because they're really cool. But it's gonna take a little time yet. I've got a couple playing projects that are just a little backburnered right now.
Yeah.
Well, I keep reorienting myself to what I have to do to get that done. It's not as simple as it was when I was living on my own in an apartment without two other professional musicians in the same house, and us trying to figure out who gets which air-conditioned room when. And some of those air-conditioned rooms are like next to each other. So like my wife teaching her violin on Skype here is not so conducive to me blowing my trumpet in the very next room. That's kind of on my part, not hers.
Of course, as it would be. So just a couple other questions that I wanted to work in, just for all the trumpet nerds who are out there. What are some of when we just talked about Phil stuff, and it seems like in so many of the Shires TV episodes, we bring up Phil Snedeker's books and his writing and stuff, and it really is incredible. But going back into the fall, what are some of the other method books or etude books or things that you're excited to get into your students' hands? Or if they're freshmen coming in, like, what are some of your go-tos?
Yeah. Well, I mean, you never go wrong with your Schlossbergs and your Clarks and the Arbins and all that kind of thing.
Like your Wheaties, yeah.
But I'll say, I mean, and I don't really treat any two students exactly the same, because a lot of them will come in with some background in this or that or the other, and sometimes they'll come in with something, and I'm not saying anybody specifically did this in the last couple of years, so they're not all sitting out there, was it me, but someone will come in and they'll play some of Mr. Chikowicz's long tone studies, and and it might, and it's not just they're my students. Sometimes
you have a trumpet in your hand. I didn't even know that you had it out.
I've got a little table down here. I got the Destino.
Right.
I got the 502.
Nice.
Yeah, they'll come in and they'll play some of Mr. Chikowicz's long tone studies, and like, then so then we start with questions.
Sure.
I ask a lot of questions in lessons. So, why do you do that? My teacher gave it to me. I said, oh, that's good. Why? Oh, it's for flow. Okay, what does flow mean? You know, and I mean, this is my thing. I want people to understand principles. I want somebody to understand that the reason that this is not as good as, and I don't know how good Zoom is doing with that, but basically that the second time my airstream is really, really steady and really continuous, and there's no bumping of the air, and there's no chewing of the chops and all this kind of stuff. Because a lot of, and I don't fault teachers at all. I mean, because I got good teaching at Ohio State. I mean, you could not do better as a trumpet technician than Richard Burkhart. The man, I mean, he played the whole Arban book down, and he's just ridiculous knowledge about how to set up trumpet players. And yet, I came out still stretching and pushing because I just wasn't hearing what he was saying. And I think that happens with a lot of young people, because I mean, if they get into BU, they're probably playing pretty well already, and so that can lead to not an active decision on their part to ignore or not pay attention to why a teacher is wanting them to do a certain exercise, but it happens. So I say, oh, okay, so let me go back. And I'll tell you, there's one real casualty that COVID is giving me right now in my teaching. Because one thing I really like to do with new students is have them do something like that, but they put their right arm down by their side, just hold their trumpet, and I move the valves. Now, that is obviously something I am not allowed to do for the foreseeable future.
I think I remember you doing that with me in a lesson at some point.
I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, I haven't come up with anything new since then. But no, I mean, and I'll do it sometimes with that or other exercises, and all of a sudden, just the eyes go, whoa, that was a weird feeling, and then I'll turn it around and have them finger my valves, and then that's a weird feeling to them, and we start talking about, oh, what's controlling what when, and what things are unconsciously linked that we need to delink, and really get principles going. So I like Mr. Chickwitz's long tone studies and the flow studies. Whiff Rudd has that fabulous collaborative practice concepts book. I use in our warm-ups, and don't do nearly as good enough job of getting my students into some of the stuff back in the book. They do get it into it on their own after a while. You let students alone long enough, they have all sorts of good ideas.
Really?
John Daniel's special studies book.
That's a great one.
Is awesome, and I love the stuff that's farther toward the front, but there's this, and I'm sure he didn't give it any thought that some joker was going to take this whole thing out to extreme, but he's got these chord studies late in the book. And what I like about the chord studies, they're a lot like Mr. Chickwitz's long tone studies, but so many of our exercises start low and go high and return low, or maybe they'll start medium and go out loud. I love Colin lip flexibilities, that start kind of in the middle. You go down farther and farther and farther. And John's things, I mean, it's just it's so simple. It's genius. It's so simple. You have a common tone you start on the top and go down. It's great for ear training, for harmonic concept and things like that. And I do that starting on C. If I have time, I do that starting on C, and I do 8 different chord forms on C.
Whoa!
And then move to C sharp.
Yeah.
So if anybody's keeping score, major, minor 7th chord, dominant 7th, minor 7th chord, minor chord with a major 7th on top, the half diminished 7th, and the augmented triad with a major 7th. That is a nasty one.
I think I need a nap. Wow.
And then start transposing that.
Right.
all the time, and covering. You start higher and higher and higher. You keep going down to the bottom, and you really start covering your entire range that way. So I started working those into the warm-up sessions. My students kind of, usually just the majors and the minors. Toward the end of the year, maybe we'll start getting into some major sevenths and dominant
Stuff,
sevenths.
yeah.
But again, they're great flow exercises, great ear exercises, great exercises for finding a smaller aperture that you try to change as little as possible as you go down.
Mhm.
My problem years ago, and I think a lot of trumpet players' problems, is they just change too much when they're changing notes. So for instance, if my friend Jens talks about the golden sixth, like from G to E. I mean, everybody can play in that G to E range. It just feels at home. You don't have to think about it. It's just there. So C, it's right in the middle of that. So if my C feels like this, and I slur down to the G, and I slur down, let's see, I'm looking at the screen, that far, but actually, really, way down here. Now, if I'm descending a fourth and I'm moving like 2 feet, away, then if I want to ascend by a fourth from C to F,
Right.
I'm going off camera.
Right.
So, now if I want anything above the F, now I need surgery, because I don't go any higher, But if I can bring that G here, now my F is here, and my B flat is there, and my E flat and my A flat, and theoretically the sky is a little bit more the limit.
Right.
So I really work with my students on the principle of trying to stay as still as possible, connect through notes, and no matter what the interval, as you expand intervals or whatnot, really try to keep, especially the first descending interval. This is where trumpet players they always sell the farm. It just
Right.
sometimes you can tell in the sound. I mean, I now with 25 years of full-time college teaching under my belt, I can start recognizing the sounds. I don't have to actually see what somebody's doing sometimes to be able to tell what they're doing.
Yeah. Yeah.
You hear it in the sound and say, oh yeah, you just and you keep everything close together. Then you go down and you come back up. On up the way. That sounded horrible.
I've heard you talk about that like consistent set kind of thing in a lot of master classes. And also, again, another like put a pin in that thought for later, Vinny DiMartino in a really similar way, also talking about some of that same stuff.
Joey Tartell.
Yeah, Joey, same deal.
He gave a master class at NTC, one year, and he started off early on and says, okay, so, somebody tell me what's the, as you go up, what's the first note of the high register? Somebody tell me. And everybody's like, and he's like, yeah, exactly. You can't tell me what the first note of the high register is. You shouldn't be thinking about the middle register and the high register. It's your register. It's all there. I like to tell students, I don't want my register feeling like this. I want it feeling like this.
Sure.
It's a shelf or it's like a piano keyboard, And so if I want to play higher, I just go to the right. I don't go up. I just move over to the right a little bit, and it's right there. It's simplistic, but trumpet playing really pretty much is all in the mind. The product that comes out is just what the mind tells it to do. And if the mind's got a good concept, and the thing that has kept me, kind of, on top of things for so long, even when I was young, is I had a very strong concept of what I was trying to play. I tell my students I'm thinking a little bit more in like, plasma screen high def, and some students are still stuck at black and white cathode ray tube that's 6 inches,
Sure.
and snowy. They have an approximate knowledge of what they're trying to do.
So can I ask how that works in terms of like how you approach memorization too? Is that a similar thing because you're taking so much into that mental image of what you're trying to do?
Yeah, all the details. I do not have a photographic or an eidetic memory or anything like that. I know a piano soloist, Stuart Goodyear. I asked him once, he had just premiered a concerto with us or something. I said, how long does it take you to work up a new concerto from the first time you see it? He's like, a couple weeks.
Yeah.
Like a piano concerto. And I said, do you have a photographic memory? He's like, well, yeah. I said, okay, never mind.
Well, so I should say also for the audience, like your own playing and your teaching in your studio has benefited from your belief that memorization is a really strong tool to have
Yeah.
in your toolbox.
And everybody needs to figure out what their gifts are that will advance that.
Yeah.
I mean, the thing is, hardly anybody can do it the way I did it for the Ellsworth Smith. Because you need to have no full-time job and a landlord that doesn't care,
Right.
and and an electric company you can put off for just long enough. Yeah, hopefully. But so I have perfect pitch, but I will say I think that people who it's probably due to my jazz background, my early, because I did a lot of playing by ear. I mean,
Yeah.
like I said, I played along with Doc's albums. So I would just put it on and I'd listen to it and I'd get it. I say, okay, let's try that, and I get some of it right, some of it wrong, and I just keep going until I had it. By ear. And I had a great connection then between the notes I wanted to play here and like what the fingerings would be and all that kind of thing. So my first suggestion for everybody who's going to want to try to really get into memorizing is really develop your ear and play by ear a lot. Really kind of just get used to playing anything that comes to your head. In auditions at BU, I ask people to play something by ear. I'll just say, hey, I mean, I'll vary it sometimes year to year. Sometimes I'll play something on the piano and have somebody play it back for me. Lately, I've just been saying, take any tune that you know and play it for me.
Just on the spot. So do people get nervous when you say that to them?
Oh yeah, I mean, some people get very, very nervous.
Yeah.
A lot of people will just grab for the national anthem,
Yeah.
which is fine. But then I actually do mix it up a little bit, and I say, okay, I have them play like 10 seconds of that. I say, great, 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 great. I say, now play that same thing starting on any other note. So I mean, I don't tell them to play it starting on F sharp or in
Whatever.
five
Yeah.
flats or anything. I just pick another note. And I mean, I'm looking for people who have an ear. If that's the optimal, okay, that somebody can just do it. Okay, great. You just really passed that part of the audition. If they can, even if they can't do it really well off the beginning, if they can kind of have the stick-to-itiveness to struggle through and make it, I still okay. I've seen something there.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
can work. I mean, if they can already play like Winton, they don't need to come to BU. I mean, that's you should be out, playing with Winton. But I do a lot of listening. When I prepared for the Ellsworth Smith, I had recordings, I had albums of all the pieces, pretty much. I think I had them all. The one that I listened to the most was Jerry Schwartz's Peter Maxwell Davies recording. Um,
Amazing. Yeah.
and I listened and I listened and I listened, and after a while, I started anticipating what was coming and when it was coming. I started being able to sing it all through. I'd analyzed it really thoroughly by that time too, knew where the 12-tone rows and all the other elements were. And then I started kind of like making little motions to it, and almost a very decrepit interpretive dance, and whatever. But it got down inside me. There was a composer with BMOP years ago that wrote me an unaccompanied piece, and when I went to record it for the CD, I'd had it now by that time for about 3 years, and she says, "You played it well when I first wrote it for you, but now you've got it inside you. She said, now it's in your body." That's what she said. I'm like, ah, and that kind of struck a chord with me about the Davies. And I mean, I walked into my pianist's house for rehearsal about 3 weeks ahead of the Ellsworth Smith and just said, "With your permission, I just want to try something really stupid once." And I said, "Can we start with the Maxwell Davies? And I'm not going to get my music out."
Huh.
And I just tried it. I mean, because it is different playing it along with an album where somebody's already playing your part,
Yeah.
and now it's just the pianist. And a pianist who, Susan Nowicki, is awesome, but she might miss a note or throw a rhythm a little bit once in a while. I mean, as would I,
Sure.
piano part. Are you kidding me? And we went through, and I only scuffed two notes. I think I had little memory blanks on two notes. I'm like, I'm that close to this. And all that Haydn and Hummel, I've known that stuff for years. Telemann, Molter, Hindemith, I've known for years. The Jolivet, I got to work on some. And so then I just set to polishing that up. But, it takes, anything like that. Obviously, nobody should be starting with their first project being, let me memorize 7 concertos and sonatas.
No, please don't. Yeah.
No, you work on one movement of one thing or one piece. I mean, I started memorizing out of financial need in ninth grade. I was going to solo and ensemble contest, Guy Ropart's Andante and Allegro. Um, my mom was playing the piano for me, and for solo and ensemble contests, because they are, cognizant of copyright, they like, okay, you can't hand the judge a photocopy.
Mm.
They need an original. And I'm thinking, my family, we didn't have a lot. I mean, my parents had scrimped and scrimped to get that, Bach B flat trumpet for me in Christmas of my ninth grade year. I mean, I about bowled them over when I saw it, because I could not believe that they found the money.
Yeah,
This
that's
is
pretty
back when my
special.
B flat was like, $600 for a new Strad. Um, we did not have much at all, and I'm like, I'll be doggone if I'm going to make my parents shell out, another whatever it was for another copy of this music to use for one thing. So I numbered the measures in my solo part and handed that original solo part to the judge. So my mom's got the piano part, he's got the solo part, and I'm just going to have to go play. And then I found out I could do it. I mean, what is it? Necessity, right?
So you do have your students. Is it like one part of their recital, one movement, or one full
Yeah.
concerto
So,
or something?
so the freshman and sophomore juries, they need to memorize their jury piece with piano. And for degree recitals, they need one major piece from memory. If they want to do more, I encourage it,
Yeah.
but I don't require it. And, people have varying degrees of success. Honestly, especially when they first get into it. I mean, I always hope that, in those freshman and sophomore experiences, they really figure out what it takes. So when they get to the junior recital and the senior recital, I mean, it's we didn't have that requirement when I first started there, and I have to say that sometimes people were coming into juries with pieces that it seemed they probably picked the week before, and then threw together with piano and came in and played a jury.
Yeah.
And I mean, if we're going to grade juries according to some what gentleman's club, that everybody's yeah, sure, sure, whatever, just come in and do it, and here's your A, and goodbye. That's one thing, but that's not going to get you a job. And if we're going to do that, at the university, we're not being very honest with our students. So we put the memorization requirement in about 3 or 4 years into my being there. There was much weeping and gnashing of teeth for a while,
Sure.
and it's not been a thing of the culture of brass instruments, much, and certainly not for like the low brass.
Right.
I mean, because again, I mean, if there are not that many trumpet soloists out there, or there really aren't that many trombone and tuba soloists to do that kind of thing. I mean, but you do see Oystein Bodsvik get up there and know music and do something. I've seen Taka do it. Marty Erickson will get up and do things by ear with Rodney's group, just him and a drum set, and he'll play Sunny Side of the Street, out of his head, boom, there it goes. I mean, this is part of being a musician, and unfortunately, most brass students I find are very satisfied to just play their instrument pretty well, um, and that's what you should be just doing just to get in the door of a conservatory university. Play your instrument pretty well. You should really, have that down so well. And really, actually, if you were really on top of it, you'd have a lot of music in ear training, theory and ear training going for you. I mean, does anybody go to major in French at a university without having at least taken a semester of French in high school? I mean, does anybody do that? But yet people walk in, and this sounds really horrible and judgmental, but people walk into music school,
Sure.
and, what music theory have you taken? I just want to play the trumpet.
Right.
Uh,
Without understanding the whole picture of everything that goes into it.
yeah.
Yeah.
See,
Yeah.
thankfully I don't get students like that.
Yeah.
Uh, they either know it beforehand or they figure it out coming in like, oh, okay, yeah, I should know my stuff, because the quicker we can get past the basics, now we can get on to meat. And why would you pay all that money for an expensive university education and want to drink milk for 4 years? You know,
Right.
I think you'd want to get to meat pretty soon. That's just me.
And you do have a reputation of having a really fantastic studio, not just in their playing ability, but also their work ethic and their camaraderie and the I mean it's a pretty special place. And I have to say too, for the trombones, the whole brass department, the whole department itself.
We have a dynamite brass faculty. It's pretty amazing, what has come through. And I have to say, For me, my students make me look good. I mean,
You got some
their
pretty stellar students.
their success, it's their success and it's their hard work, and I'm just trying to point them in some good directions. Try to give them a few hints about what you really shouldn't do in public. Um, Things like that. You'd be surprised at the things that people don't really know. I knew somebody in Philadelphia years ago who was a freelancer in town and going out drinking with people after gigs and talking down everybody else who played that person's instrument in town. Can you believe this person does this and this,
Man,
and then wonder why they weren't getting any work?
right.
Well, there's a pretty easy answer there. Respect and humility and gratitude, will go a long way in this business, even if you are not, the next coming of Wynton Marsalis or Phil Smith or Maurice Andre or Hoken. I mean, that's, I'll say, like the people that I really like to work with, the obviously the folks in the pops, are just fantastic. What a great bunch of people. And, I imagine when I was young, if I got into a position like that, it would have been such a kick just for me to be able to do, and I'm there and I'm doing it, but it's for me much more about the people I'm hanging with, about Mike Dobrinsky next to me, Bruce Hall, Rich Kelly, Hans Boone sitting behind me, and Alexei and Angel and Taka and Kevin,
Just the
and
best of the best.
all those people. It's the people you work with. And I go out on the road with Rodney Marsalis. Rodney is a fabulous trumpet player. I mean, I think one of the quotes, there's a quote from Wynton, his cousin out there, about, nobody plays beautifully all the time unless it's my cousin Rodney, or it's something like that. It's really, I wish I could quote it. I got to go back and memorize that, but it's not musical, so I have to work on it. But the thing is, for as amazing as Rodney plays, he's even a much better person, and he gets, and those are the only kind of people he'll hire. I'm like, thank you for hiring me, that you think that of me. But we go out on those things and everybody can just play. Everybody's ears are wide open. Kids, when you're working on chamber music, can you listen to anybody but yourself, please? Anybody,
Right.
all the time. Any chamber music class we have at BU, I always start out with, you do well if you listen to other people more than yourself. And that's what happens in Rodney's group. So we go out, and it doesn't matter whether it's an 11-piece group or a 5-piece group or 7-piece group or whatever in between. And that's, if I can be the proud dad, Peter had the opportunity to go out and play with Rodney on a gig that I was on in Green Bay back in November.
Oh, yeah.
And he nailed it, not just because he could play all the parts, but Rodney could see that his eyes were open and his ears were open.
Right.
And these are the things that will keep you moving forward in music. People need to stop being trumpet heads and just be musicians. I love in BEMA, Boston Modern Orchestra Project, when I can sneak inside of an oboe player's sound.
Yeah.
That's what I remember. Eric Berlin would always talk about that with Charlie Schluter in the BSO. How Charlie just really tried to do things like that and weave the sound in and all that time. Tom does that too. They're magicians with the sound.
Right. Absolutely.
And I just love doing that kind of thing. And if once in a while I get a solo, that's cool. But it's much more about what the audience gets out of it than what I get out of it. So.
You kind of answered the next question I was going to ask you, and maybe our final question, just so that we can I don't know, I start going to bed earlier lately during all this time. Maybe it's because I have a 1-year-old at home, but
Couldn't be that.
could be something to do with it. But
they do grow out of it.
that's true. I'm sure.
You grew out of it just last year. It was great. No.
I know, and he's a rock star now. No, so the question that I was planning on asking, you kind of answered it, but maybe there's something else you'd like to add. What are some of the most important things that you want your students to learn from you?
Well, I probably did mostly answer it.
Is there anything else?
Obviously, you know, how to play the trumpet, in the physical manner efficiently, physically quietly. That's another thing. Scott Belk's book, his books
Oh yeah, of course.
are awesome, and he talks in the front in one of them about things should be musically and physically quiet, but yeah, how so? The nuts and bolts, and then the what to do with it. know music so that you can use those tools to tell a story, learn how to tell a story. But all of that is for naught if nobody wants to work with you. And I have to say, it's not in my job description, according to BU. Teach trumpet literature, teach chamber music, whatnot. But you know, it's those being a good person traits, you know, and I mean, I go back a whole lot in myself to the good book. A lot of the things that I talk about come from there, even though I don't use that terminology all the time. But being honorable, when my students, and they'll all make mistakes this way, and sometimes, very rarely, sometimes I have to, the voice gets a little stern. It's pretty rare these days, actually.
Yeah.
I'd like to think that I've learned how to address things without having to go nuclear. But if I feel like that's what needs to happen, that they will never forget what we're talking about, then I'll do that. I owe them that. Things that's happened in my life. I've made a lot of mistakes once, and
Yeah.
because somebody went nuclear on me, I'm like, okay, I know I will never do that again. So when I see them doing things that aren't either honorable or wise, I'll try to guide them as much as possible. Try to help them think through. If you call up this other person and say, I just got a better job than yours, so I'm not going to do yours. Okay, think this through from the other person's viewpoint. What would you do if you heard this from somebody? If you were the one hiring, and of course, most students haven't been in that position. They don't know what it's like to be a contractor.
New perspective, of course.
And so, I'm always, I mean, what I do, whether it's in my teaching or my playing, it's about other people. It's not about me. It's about other people. And if I can get my students to catch that, that what they're doing, the practice they're doing, the training they're doing, the courses they're taking, even the non-music courses, these are things that are going to equip you to serve people better. Okay? Even if you're a soloist on a recital stage, you're serving people. And I think artists that forget that get themselves in a world of hurt. And I have to say, I mean, do I think this is original with me? I mean, certainly not. I mean, I go back to Roger Voisin, and Roger, I don't know how much of this, was his attitude when he was actually in the orchestra, or whether there was things that he came to after the fact. But he said, you can walk into an orchestra and you can try to be an artist, and you can assist on your way of interpreting things, no matter what the conductor wants. And the conductor tells you to change something, and you take personal offense because that was your idea, and now they're having me do something in a terrible way, and I don't want to do that. And you go home and you're miserable, and you yell at your kids, and you complain to your wife, and you kick the dog, and all these, you're just a miserable person. He says, but if you go into the orchestra as a workman, as a servant, and you've got a bag of tools, and you take your bag of tools, and you sit it next to you, and then you pull out the tool, and you do this, and then the conductor says, for my vision of this, I need a different tool. You say, wait a minute, I got that. Boom. I mean, it reminds me a little bit. I'd watched Ralph Sauer's Shires TV thing, and you talk about the mouthpiece,
Yeah.
in addition with L.A. Phil, and thinking they wanted one thing, and Zubin said, oh, wait, why is it so bright? Oh, wait, pull out a different mouthpiece, and there it is. And that's our job. Even if you're going to be a soloist, I mean, you've got a little bit more leeway, obviously, to make your own statement or whatever. But that's pretty rarefied being. There aren't many actual full-time trumpet soloists out there in that way. Most of us are making our living next to people, and in front of a conductor, and learning how to talk to other people. So that when you do have a difference, if I mean, there are times when I might be playing in a conductor, and they might, maybe I think they're making a certain mistake in what they're doing, or just really not doing something that's helping what's going on. And, if I do that, if I think I can help, I will it's like Jeopardy. I'm going to phrase this in the form of a question. or I'll put it on, I'm not sure I'm quite perceiving what you're doing there. I'm wondering if it would be okay if you did this instead of that to help me,
Right.
rather than saying, you don't know what you're doing up there. That's not the pattern you should use, even if I'm principal in a section, you know, if I've got an octave or a fifth that's kind of going sideways with whoever's sitting next to me, I'm kind of like, I feel like I'm high to you, these are really, and it's not just to be obsequious or anything like that or false, because the thing is, I am high to that person. Now, maybe my opinion is that I'm where it needs to be and they need to come up, you know, maybe I do need to come down, and sometimes I will try to go to somebody else before I will start insisting for them to come to me.
Mhm.
The great thing about things like Rodney's group is everybody's just going there. We've never played a tuning note in that group, ever. None of the gigs I've played in Rodney's group have we played a tuning note. And do we play out of tune? No, we do not. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
It's like, Marty, give us a B flat. Okay, no, oh, and I will allow, brass quintets and things I'm coaching to do tuning notes. But actually, what I usually tell them to do is start playing chorales. Play some chords and just listen. Just agree. Can we figure out how to get along graciously as musicians and players as well as people? And I think they're very much interrelated.
Yeah.
I find that people who are gracious in how they act also tend to be gracious in how they play. And if I've got some students out there that can, that can bring what they need to bring, the skills they need to bring, the music they need to bring, but do it in a gracious way that supports and builds up other people. What are we in this for? If we're in this for ourselves, one, you are completely miserable right now.
It's a good point.
There's really hardly any way to grab people's attention. There really isn't, unless somebody invents a way of reach out from a 3D screen to actually grab people by the throat when they're scrolling by your Facebook thing. No, it's got to be about what we can do for other people, if I'm checking that box, then I feel like I can rest my head on the pillow at night and feel like I've done pretty well. And if my students are checking that box, I can really sleep well.
It's so interesting. This episode of Shires TV has brought so much of my own life full circle since I've known you for 13, 14, 15 years now. And just all of this kind of coming in and filtering in from memories of seeing you work with people and working with you and quintet coachings and hearing you play performances and give masterclasses. It's just such an honor for me to get to listen to your stories and hear all of this come roundabout. And it's such a true message inspired by passion and just wanting, like you said, to serve people. And it's a really beautiful thing. Thank you.
That's the whole thing. And that's, again, I'm proud of where you're going and what you've been doing. It's so amazing. I just, see people that I know that I knew when. I knew you. I think I met you. Were you still in high school, maybe?
Yeah,
or
I was in high school. Yep.
Yeah. So
fun stuff. Man, Terry, thank you so much for doing this. What a blast! It's nice to see you, even though I didn't get to come see you when you picked up some horns at the shop.
Yeah, dropped off, picked up, and yeah.
No, it's funny. Well, thanks to everybody else for tuning in for this session of Shires TV. Again, it's total blast for me, and what a treat, what an honor. We're going to keep more content coming your way through this month. We have a few fun things scheduled. I think next week we're going to do a fun virtual fitting and kind of show you what we're going to be moving forward with. Alexis and I will be kind of on screen and maybe with a person on the other end doing this kind of virtual fitting thing so we can show you what we're thinking. And we'll keep some more content coming through the end of August. And then we may start paring Shires TV back a little bit and bring in content, on a somewhat regular basis, but maybe not every single week. It's a lot, but it's been a real blast. And like you said, pulling stuff from listening to Ralph Sauer, pulling stuff from Joe Leslie, or pulling stuff from the collegiate trombone panel, the first thing that we did. It's really nice to get to see everyone coming together during this time and sharing so freely of their talents and their insight and their love for what they do. So thanks to you, Terry.
Thank you, Sam.
And thanks everybody for tuning in, and we'll see you guys next time.
All right.
Bye. See ya.